Okay, so we are going to start tonight's meeting. It is 7 o'clock. Thank you for all joining us in this different format again. So I have to ask, do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll get started. The first item on the agenda, since we don't have a consent agenda, we're going to have to do all of our bylaws as individual items. So our first item is a confirmatory bylaw. I'll need a mover and a seconder for that. So again, if you press your space bar, you can momentarily unmute if you wanted to say. I did see you wave your hand, Councillor Foster. Sorry, and I need a seconder. Councillor Hayden. Okay, the motion reads, be it resolved that bylaw 296720 be adopted, being a bylaw of the town of Espanola to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting of May 19th, 2020. And I'm going to assume that there's no discussion on this. It's a confirmatory bylaw that we always have in our consent agenda. I don't see anyone waving at me. So I'm just going to go to recorded vote. I am for the motion. Councillor Dufour?
For.
Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Foster? So again, I think if you press your space bar, you can momentarily unmute. Councillor Foster, I've unmuted you for you.
Okay. Yes, for. I didn't have my keyboard on. I was just gonna touch the screen with the
okay.
pen.
Okay. I will mark you as a 4 then. And Councillor Malott, sorry.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Van Alstyne.
4.
Okay, thank you. So that motion is carried. Okay, we'll move on to our second agenda item, and that's the budget to actual report. And it was available to us for information only. And Councillor Van Alstyne has submitted a number of questions. So I'm going to turn this over to our CAO to run through anything that she wants to highlight off the report and go through the answers to Councillor Van Alstyne's questions as well. So Cynthia, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So the first question was with regards to the prior year tax write-off, $16,636. So that's one property owner. And in 2017, there was a Section 357 application made because the property was I had a fire. So that was processed, but then in 2018 and 2019, MPAC returned the roll at the original value. So neither one of us noticed, and that reduction was processed in 2020. Then there was a question about waiting 4 years for the write-off of taxes, and I just wasn't sure what that was referring to. I'll just leave that one till the end, and then if Maureen has the question, we can come back to that again. The next question was with regards to the building improvements. So there was a positive variance there of $47,259, and that's because the renovations for this building have not taken place. We had budgeted for the new roof, and there were modifications to the POA office, which we're waiting for the province's approval before we can proceed with those. And then there's some other minor items such as emergency lighting and so on. Okay. Building services, there was a question there. So during the time period, we were still doing inspections and issuing permits for a lot of that time period. There was a brief time period where we weren't allowed to issue new permits, but we were still doing inspections. And we were still doing all the paperwork so that when the restrictions were lifted, then we could proceed with those. So March and April building departmental reports were outstanding at the last meeting. Those will be forthcoming. In March, they closed 5 permits and issued 14 new permits with a projected value of $167,000. In April, they closed 11 permits and issued 13 new permits with a project value of $1.6 million. The Connecting Link funding, we received the first draw for the section from McDonald's to McCullough, and that was as per the contract. We get our first draw when it gets awarded. So we had to award that one before the end of the year last year. And our draw was $1,467,721 for that. So that project is now just underway. There was a question on the water and sewer revenues because of the negative variance there. So I will be working with the Public Works Department. We do have to do some projections to the ministry by August 3rd. So I hope to bring those to council sometime in June. And we just started billing on meters in October for commercial and industrial. So I think some of the difference could be just timing of usage, which I expect is higher in April to September. Okay. Then there was a question on the financing payments under the water and sewer area. So originally back in 2012, we debentured $6.5 million. It was a 25-year term with the interest rate of 3.59%, and that's with Ontario Infrastructure Projects Corporation. And then she had another follow-up question just on the environmental collection services with GFL. So we're still waiting. We haven't heard anything more from them, but once we get their proposal, we'll bring it to council for further direction, and then council can decide if we want to negotiate or go to tender at that point in time. And that was all the questions that I had written, unless there were some others. Jill, I think you're muted.
Councillor Van Alstyne, did that answer all your questions, or did you have further questions?
No, I thank you very much. I really didn't think you would have time to answer them today, so thank you very much. And I think I must have got the 4 years mixed up. I think I was thinking of before it was a sale of property. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, so that was an informational report. So we will go on. I need to scroll down. So the next one is a staff report about the budget, and I do have a resolution. That's for the next one. So this one is a staff report, basically looking at the 2020 budget in terms of where things were standing. So we have been provided with some of the changes potentially because of COVID-19. Is this the one? Sorry.
Yep.
So we had initially started in March 10th. That was our last meeting that we were looking at the budget. We had we had some adjustments to reflect a 2.29% increase over 2019, and we had some last few other changes that we were talking about. So those are all in that staff report, and that's for kind of information for us. Were there any questions on that particular staff report?
Is it on?
That staff report starts on page 14. I think I'll make some notes on my agenda so I can help refer to the right pages. Councillor Foster.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, it's obvious that the revenue side of the equation is really in limbo, okay, because we don't know what's going to happen to the complex and what's happening with COVID. And the cost side is also sort of in limbo because of the same sort of things. And that's all I had to say, okay? But I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, like,
It's difficult for a budget to be decided in detail.
it definitely is. We do have some cost savings that are coming because we do have some closures, but we also have some other expenditures. That really comes up in our next staff report that we have. So unless there's any other questions that we have on the previous report, Cynthia, looks like you have a comment.
I just wanted to make a comment because when I first started doing this, writing this staff report, I was intending to give council an amended version. And so some of it's written like that I have reduced the revenues here or there or whatever. So it just, as I got through it, there was just too much that I couldn't quantify. So I still brought this forward for information. And so that's why it's kind of written in the way it is. I just wanted to explain that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to the next item. It's on page 17. And we have a motion on the floor for this, so I'll need a mover and a seconder. The motion is, be it resolved that council adopt the third draft version 2 of the 2020 municipal budget and the appropriate bylaws be adopted. So I'll need a mover and a seconder, so we can put it on the floor for discussion. Councillor Foster, and a seconder. I need a seconder to put it on the floor for discussion.
I will, Councillor Hayden.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Hayden. Be it resolved that council adopt the third draft version 2 of the 2020 municipal budget and the appropriate bylaws be adopted. Okay, so here we have some changes that were reflected in the budget. We do know that we can't quantify everything that COVID is going to cost a municipality. We can't quantify, and Councillor Foster was correct in this, we can't quantify exactly what that's going to look like in terms of lost revenue yet, and in terms of any extra expenses. But we do have some ideas in terms of what that's looking like. We know that we are not hiring a 9th summer student at Public Works. So we have been able to reduce the levy from 2.29% down to 2.15%. So there's, that goes along with this budget. There is a separate analysis on the tax ratios. That is the next staff report, that, but it is in line with what this budget looks like. It keeps this residential taxpayers are not going to see a general increase in assessment. So even though it looks like there's a 2.15% increase, that's the total tax levy is the 2.15% increase, but we've had a 2.55% assessment growth. We've had new houses being developed in the Brentwood Village. So our growth that we've had is bigger than the increase in the levy that we had. So all of our residential taxpayers, if they haven't had any increase from MPAC, they're not going to see an increase in their overall taxes for this year. So that is definitely good news, and it's a good reason to celebrate the assessment growth that we have and that we're experiencing right now. So we need to get this budget adopted, and I think there's some impacts and there's some financial reporting that Cynthia, you have to do. Is that correct? That is coming up soon.
Yeah, well, just the province has been asking for our final tax bills so that they can make their payments for their payment in lieu portions. And, you know, the sooner we pass it, the better.
Okay, so are there any concerns about the budget as it stands? So a 2.15% increase in overall levy, but that is being basically taken up by the growth that we've had in the municipality. So any questions or concerns? Councillor Foster, let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Foster.
I'm in favor of passing the budget. The reason for that is we don't know where we are for sure, but we do have a ton of money in reserves. And if we find that our revenue drops quite a bit more, we have the money to cover that without hitting the taxpayer. And this is like a one-time event, okay? So that's a good reason to use reserves. From the cost side, a lot of it depends on how the COVID is spread, okay? And if it's not too bad, we may be able to open up the complex and return back to normal expenditures. And if we can't open the complex, then we're going to save money. So I think it's just a reasonable thing to pass what we had there now. We had quite a fair number of meetings on what we already had, and we'll just use our reserves to cushion us for the unexpected.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Alstyne?
For myself, I would prefer to see a 0 increase. I realize that we've talked about this a few times, but every time a day goes by, there are more people who will still remain out of work. There's a lot more uncertainty. And as Councillor Foster said, we do have money in reserves. I just don't feel that this is the time to increase any kind of tax rate at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Now I will point out that I have, and it's in our staff report, residential property owners that have no increase in assessment will have no increase in their overall taxes. So for all of our residents that we have, they're not going to see an increase in their taxes. The 2.15% is an increase in the overall levy. So if you haven't done anything or made any improvements to your house, you haven't been reassessed, you are not going to have an increase. You're going to have a 0 increase in your taxes. That increase in the levy is being borne by the increase in the assessment growth by the new construction that we've had in the municipality. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that you understand that people are not going to see increases on their tax bills. Okay, Councillor Dufour.
If people aren't going to see the increases on the tax bill, why are we putting an increase, period?
Because
Sorry, were you able to hear me?
Yeah, I was. We do have an increase in expenses that we need to account for. And that is being borne by the extra assessment that we have moving forward. We've all seen the budget, and I know it's been a while since we've had it. We have a copy of it here in our report, and we will not, that 2.15% is borne by the new development. So there's no increase in residential taxpayers. Councillor Dufour.
Yeah, okay. That being the case, I have to agree with Councillor Van Alstyne.
Okay. Councillor Duplessis, were you adjusting something or you had your hand up? Okay, Councillor Duplessis, go ahead. Oh, let me unmute you.
Just press the space bar.
Yeah, I got it now. You have control of us. It was so long I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
I don't understand the assessment part, of course, but I think what we went through here, and then we made a bylaw to forgive taxes on forgive penalties on taxes and water bills. And I agree with the Councillor Van Alstyne and Councillor Dufour. We should have a 0 because there's a lot of business not open. There's a lot of people are working, and this would be a rare time to do that because we still have, as the bill said, we still have reserves. One is the sale of hydro, which we haven't create any resolution to do anything with it. So there's quite a bit of money there, and the small amount of money that the 2.15 would take would easily come out of there if we needed it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about that increase in assessment again, because I'm not sure that we have a complete understanding of that. The increase in assessment that we have is the fact that we have new houses that were constructed in town. We have all of the new construction in Brentwood Village. We have a new school. There's going to be property taxes on that school. So all of those new property taxes comes to an assessment growth of the 2.55%. So that's where that assessment growth is coming from. So any increase that we have, the 2.15 number is coming from last year's budget, whatever last year's budget was. It has increased by 2.15%. But every individual homeowner that exists right now is not going to see any increase in their taxes. There's going to be a zero increase to individuals because of the extra housing stock that we have in the extra commercial stock that we have in terms of new businesses in the community. So that's where the extra money is coming from in terms of being able to pay for that 2.15%, is not coming from existing homeowners that's there. Councillor Van Alstyne.
I understand what you're talking about. However, those new builds are exactly what we need to help our economy go. I don't see where penalizing them or having them pay the increase is helping. I still stand with a 0% increase. I understand what you're saying in that they are going to be paying for their increased value of the property. However, considering how much they are contributing to our economy by bringing in those buildings, I think at this point in time, a 0% increase is what's called for. That's my opinion.
Councillor Duplessis, I saw your hand go up, and then Councillor Foster.
Okay, just on page 47, it's
Okay,
the
let me
impact.
go down to that.
Just I need an explanation on that.
Okay, give me a second to get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what that means. Say the tax and assessment increase, or it says okay, $36 for 100,000 assessed. What does that mean? How does that relate, if anything? Obviously not to residential.
Okay, so this is residential. So this is the third draft. The first version. Sorry, Jill, I just cut in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that's the first version?
Yes. So then the
Okay.
second version, let's just find what page that's on.
Okay, there's two, yeah.
Right, so it's on, the page numbers are a bit mixed up in the document. Page 79 of the overall document then.
Okay.
Yeah, so for,
Cindy, I'm just going to let everybody give a chance to scroll up to that page 7.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So this would be for the average household. If you had the average assessment and it went from 142 to 146, then that is the 2.55% increase in assessment. And so this is what the increase would be. I mean, if you take the average, it is different, right? Then looking at where the actual new assessment is coming from, that's what we're talking about, is the new assessment. And that they are effectively making up the increase.
Okay, thanks.
So this is average, so it's not exactly it's a complicated thing to explain.
Councillor
It's
Dufour.
complicated to understand.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's complicated to understand, for me anyway.
Okay, Councillor Dufour.
That still requires an increase, and I don't want to see an increase. For every 100,000, it says here it's $42.30. Is that right?
Yes, if your assessment was going up by $100,000, that's what it would be.
Yep, that's right. Thanks.
But if your assessment hasn't changed, you are not going to see any increase.
No,
Like,
right. So the important thing is to look at the rate. And in this case, we've kept the rate the same. So for 2019, the municipal and education portion was 0.017017777. So in 2020, if we kept the rate, the residential rate the same, you know, the full amount, it would all be related to assessment increase. So if your house has not increased in assessment, you're going to pay exactly the same.
And in the future, Cynthia, then, if that's the case, when this is no longer applicable, does that mean that our we'll say for next year, and there is no assessment that is changed, what would the taxes go up then, if they go up at all?
Well, that would be up to council for next year. But I mean, you can, a lot of municipalities do just go based on the rate and, you know, keep the rate either the same or go higher or lower.
So our rate has not changed from last year to this year.
Right, that the combined rate is the same.
Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah,
How
it's
come
clear.
councillors turning off their video cameras?
I don't know. Some of them aren't.
This is Councillor Hayden. I am because I lag too much
Okay.
video, then it lags.
Thank you.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Did someone turn that on? I don't know where I turn it off, so I can't turn it on.
Okay, let's see if I can figure it out for you.
Ken, go to the bottom left-hand part of your screen.
Oh, there he's back.
Okay, I'll have to learn that one too. Thank you.
Every time I hover above your name, the little icon changes to other options for me. So I couldn't turn you back on either. But thank you, because you had disappeared on us. So we have not seen an increase in the tax rate to our municipality. So that's an important thing to note. So that for a $100,000 assessed home, again, it looks like it's a $42.30, but again, we're looking at an average for the entire municipality, which is really difficult when you're talking about new homes taking up that increase in the overall assessment versus what an individual household is going to be paying. So there's not going to be, if there's no increase in assessment, there's going to be no change to any individual household because the tax rate is staying the same. We've had no increase in our tax rate from last year to this year. Okay, so the concern about not wanting people's taxes to go up, they will not if their assessment isn't changing. Okay, Councillor Dufour.
Yeah, my position hasn't changed.
Okay, but you want the tax rate to stay the same. The tax rate is staying the same. There's no changes to individuals in the community. Councillor Van Alstyne, I see your hand up. Is there something else that you still were requesting to say?
No, I'm following everything that you were saying. I understand. But still, the people who are doing renovations and building, they are still adding to our economy and they are adding to our tax base. And in my opinion, I don't believe that now is the time that they should be taxed higher. I realize that if I didn't do anything on my home, I most likely would not have a rate increase. But I think that that should be across the board, and the other people should be the same.
So if we don't have this 2.15% increase, we're going to have a number of people get lower taxes this year. And we talked about that when we were going through the budget process about being problematic, about always holding to that 0% increase. It puts lots of inflationary pressure in terms of the municipality being able to do things. The municipality is still faced with the inflation that we have. We still have increase in our costs. We have increase in labor that are negotiated wage increase. We have inflationary on the goods that we are purchasing. And when we continue to hold a 0% increase for as long as council and previous councils have done, it puts a lot of pressure on the municipality. And so we have to address that. Right now, we also don't know if we are going to have any further funding cuts coming forward. And what you're proposing by not having the additional assessment take up that extra little bit, you're proposing more strain on the municipality going forward. So I just want to clarify that if that's the position that council wants to take, then that's something that you have to be aware of, because it's your responsibility as councillors to look after the municipality as well. And so the municipality has those costs that we still have to pay for. So we have to be aware of that. So we can make we can decide what we want to do, but we have to be aware of our responsibility to the municipality as well. Okay, so
Bill wants to talk to you.
Sorry, Cynthia, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, like, the comment, like, we're not in any way penalizing the new assessment or anything at all. They're just paying their fair share, which is helping to reduce the overall burden for everyone.
Okay, that's a very fair statement, because you're right. They're not being penalized. They're paying taxes and contributing to the municipality like everyone else. Thank you. Okay, was there another hand that I missed? Councillor Foster. Oh, give me a second, Councillor Foster. Go ahead.
If we were to make it 0% this year, okay, zero increase, our spending is still going up a little bit. It's going up because we have things outside our control that are happening, and we still have to cover those costs. If we use reserves to keep the tax rate down, you're going to have to face the bullet sometime. Okay, so next year you might be looking at a 3 or 4% increase because you try to keep it zero this year. We have things like health and ambulance and things that we have no control over that have still gone up in cost, and we still have to pay those costs. So impact is just, it's a system set in place for property taxes. And if I add $100,000 addition to the house, I expect, like any other taxpayer adds $100,000 addition to the house, that the value of the house is going to be more and I'm going to pay more. But if I don't add to the value of the house, then I'm not likely going to face an increase. And this budget, as it sits now, does that. We have other unknowns there that we don't know about, and we are providing some support to the taxpayer, because people who are faced with not being able to pay their taxes there now aren't being penalized with interest payments and stuff like that. So we're going to use, we'll probably end up using some of our reserves to handle some of that. But If we don't do an increase this year, it's 0%. And the expenditures have gone up. It just means that you're just pushing the problem, making it twice as big next year. And if you do the same thing next year, it becomes 3 times the size the year after that.
And I think we get to the point where we end up frittering away the reserve that we have. Cynthia, and then we'll go back to you, Ken. Councillor
Oh, darn. Now I feel like I lost my train of thought too. Okay, so I did just want to clarify, just to state that, you know, I do expect probably, you know, in the next 6 months or however long, that the municipality, I'll probably bring forward some options to council. I expect that there's going to be province-wide targeted measures to the businesses that are, or people that are affected the most, you know, to provide some relief because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I just, you know, we got to think about whether we want to give everyone the same benefit or whether we want to target potential programs to places that, or people that may need it more than others. That's.
Thank you. And we also have tax write-offs that go with that. Councillor Duplessis.
I think the statements by Bill and Cynthia are fair. The only difference is a different year, a very special year, and this is probably the only chance we have to do that. And next year, we might have to make tough decisions. So that's the position we're in, so we can make tough decisions.
Okay, I'm also going to add some other considerations that we need to think of as well. We have an advantage this year that by being able to put in a 2.15% increase and keeping it at 2.15 and having that paid by the new assessment, what potentially might happen next year if we don't have new assessment? And then we also know that with all of the funding that the province is providing to businesses and landlords and everybody else that is being affected and the spending that they're doing trying to keep the economy moving, that there is likely going to be cuts to municipal transfers. There's going to be probably increased spending by public health, and they've already had a 10% increase in the public health budget. There's probably going to be increased spending by DSABs with cost because they bear the land ambulance costs. So we are likely to see some increases next year because of those increased costs that we just pass on to our residents. Right? We don't have control over those costs. Those are basically flow through our municipality. So this year we have the option, it's a 2.15% increase, but it's not hitting our residents that we have in town. The new residents that are being constructed are the ones that are bearing that cost, and they're paying the fair share. So we would be gambling if we say we are going to give people a tax cut and reduce that rate, right? Because the rate hasn't changed. If we reduce that rate and give people a tax cut and give that across the board, next year we might have shot ourselves in the foot a lot more. And I think we might be looking at a lot more than a 4% increase. We might be looking at something like a 6 or 7% increase, which is where we started right now. So with this budget, as it stands, we have zero increase in the rate that we are charging. So there is no increase if you are paying the same assessment, right? So it's something that we need to really seriously consider before we go ahead and vote on this motion.
This is Councillor Hayden. May I speak?
Yes, you may.
I think that we should know that it's because there is no increase to the average taxpayer right now. Oh, and there goes my train of thought. I'm sorry. When I get it back, I'll let you know. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor Millett, you've been quiet on this. Do you have something that you'd like to weigh in with?
Okay, I've just been absorbing this. The tax levy that you're talking about, the 2.15,
Right.
That is only for new builds and the school and any other business that comes in this year?
No. The 2.15%. So I don't have what our overall budget, I'm just going to use a nice round number. So our overall budget last year was $10 million.
Mhm.
What we're saying is we've increased that overall levy that we are trying to get from the residents and commercial businesses by 2.15%. Okay, so overall, our overall budget is increasing by 2.15%. But in order to pay for that overall budget increase, there's not going to be any increase borne by our existing taxpayers. That increase in the budget is being paid for by new commercial businesses and new residential construction that has gone on in the municipality that is now starting to pay their fair share of taxes the same as everyone else does. So there's no increase to I'm seeing Cynthia put her hand up. Hopefully I didn't say something wrong, but there's no increase for anybody that is already existing. Cynthia, go ahead. You can correct.
I do want to clarify that, because if someone did have an assessment increase, they will see an increase. Like if their assessment increased $10,000 over 4 years, it gets phased in. So this year they would already be planning on having a $2,500 phased in assessment. So they would see an increase. But anyone that does not have an assessment increase will not see an increase in their tax, because we've kept the rate the same.
Okay.
So this year we were supposed to have an assessment done by MPAC, which was now postponed because of COVID. So when they do come in to do it next year, probably, because, you know, obviously there's not much time now, everyone is going to see a different, or maybe see the same, or maybe see a slightly higher assessment. And that's this 2.15 would then show for next year?
Well, the 2.15, sorry, Jill, it's in our expenses this year. That's how much our expenses are increased. So that's what we're looking to recover. So right now we have an opportunity to recover that through this little bit of increase in assessment growth. There's no guarantees for next year.
So if MPAC has not done theirs, if you're supposed to have the assessment and MPAC hasn't done it and put it off till next year, your taxes are not going to change this year. And then when your assessment comes in next year, it would be affected by whatever's next year's percentage would be.
Alrighty, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hayden, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
Thank you.
When we go about do some improvements or whatever to our home, we automatically expect that there is going to be an increase in taxes whenever the next assessment comes around to our area. So that, you know, that shouldn't, we're not penalizing anybody because they've built new homes. We're not adding that extra money on. We're just, because they're now paying taxes, that's covering what we would have to charge everybody else normally. And I think that that's the part that's been a little bit hard for people to understand, is that it's covered because new people are now paying their taxes just like you pay your taxes. We're not giving them an increase. We're not having an increase because those extra people paying taxes gives us extra revenue, which will knock out what the increase is for this year. And I think that this is a very wise move. I see that people have been working really hard with all of this, and I think that they need to be appreciated for that. But I do think we should move ahead and pass this budget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands going up, or Councillor Hayden, if you, thank you. I don't see any other hands going up or waving at me. I just wanted to check something for process with our clerk. So Paula, if you can unmute yourself. If we defeat this as a motion, right, what would happen in terms of bringing it back to change it? Or would you prefer that we do someone see if an amendment passes to this motion?
I would suggest the easiest way to do it would be to, to have an amendment. So right now it's that council, oh wait. Hang on, I've got to get the right page in front of me, but I would suggest you do it as an amendment, Joe. I think that, or Councillor, or Mayor Beer, because if you defeat it, then it has to come back either as a new motion, with somebody has to propose a new motion, or you would reconsider. So.
Okay. So before this goes forward, I want to know the people that are opposing this, has any part of this discussion influenced how you're going to be voting for this? Because
That's not a fair question. That is a fair question, Joe.
Why is that not a fair question?
Well,
Because
you're
I
asking us
know
what we're going to vote.
whether we're going to vote on this motion as it is, or whether there's going to be an amendment. I haven't heard anybody propose an amendment. Right now, I think I know where 3 people sit on both sides, and there's one counselor that I don't know how they sit in terms of whether they would vote for this motion or not. So if I call the motion and it gets defeated, we are now going to be in trouble in terms of being able to deal with this motion. Councillor Duplessis.
Procedural bylaw, if we defeat the motion, can we not make another motion immediately? It's the same subject.
Sorry.
If that's the case, we don't have to necessarily make amendment to a motion that we haven't voted on yet, because what you're saying is, how does everybody feel before we make the motion? Do we make the amendment to the motion now or later? The motion is on the floor. That's what we're dealing with.
Right.
You don't really know how anybody's going to vote.
Right. So typically what would happen is we could make an amendment to the motion before it's voted on. Right? Paula, go ahead.
I was trying to get my video on so you could see me, but I would suggest you've got the motion on the floor, call it to a vote. Someone can table a notice of motion, for 0% or whatever council wishes, and then you go from there. That would be probably the most reasonable way to do it. Call it to a vote and then take it from there.
Okay, so I don't see any other discussion on this motion. So I will call the motion and we'll just go through the list again. I am for the motion. Councillor Dufour?
Against.
Councillor Duplessis?
Against.
Councillor Hayden?
For.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Sorry, I have to unmute you or press your space bar when you speak. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, I got that. Thank you. Councillor Malott?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Van Alstyne?
Against.
Thank you. So the motion has been defeated. Councillor Van Alstyne?
I'll put forth a notice of motion that the budget be a 0% increase.
Okay, thank you. Give me a second to confer with the clerk.
Yes.
Paula?
Yes.
I don't have a notice of motion form, and I have one motion form, because if I recall the procedure bylaw, we would vote on the notice of motion kind of as an emergency motion tonight. Or should we put this to just as a notice of motion and put this to next week?
So, Joe, what I would suggest, or Councillor Mayor Beer, what I suggest is that you create them in front of you. So you've got one blank motion right on the top of it, notice of motion, and it's moved by Councillor Van Alstyne. Ask for a seconder, ask if Councillor Van Alstyne wants it heard tonight. So, vote on it, ask if she wants it heard tonight. And if so, just take a blank piece of paper and write the same motion and have it voted on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a motion, sorry, Councillor Van Olsen, I'm going to get you to state that again so I can write it down, please.
I'd like to move a notice of motion that we have a 0% budget increase.
Okay. So I'm going to word it similar. Council adopt a third draft version 2 of the 2020 municipal budget with a 0% increase.
That's acceptable.
Okay. Okay, so I will need a seconder on this motion. Councillor Dufour, I saw your hand go up before Councillor Malott, so I'll take Councillor Dufour. And Councillor Van Alstyne, would you like this motion heard tonight?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we will be voting. Paula, you may need to correct me if I'm doing something wrong. We will be voting on hearing this motion tonight.
So what you're doing right now is you're voting on the notice of motion. That's all
Right.
you do. Yeah. So we do that first.
Okay, so we're voting on the notice of motion.
So we can bring it to the table.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah. So ask each counselor how they're going to vote.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to vote first because I'm on the first one on the list. I am going to vote against this motion. I have another idea, but we're on this motion now, so I might need to make an amendment to the motion when we're actually at the motion. So Councillor Dufour, I'm going to ask you for your vote. Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Councillor Hayden?
In favor.
Councillor Foster?
Against.
Councillor Malott?
In favor.
And Councillor Van Alstyne?
In favor.
Okay, so this notice of motion has carried. And you wish this to be heard tonight, so now we're going to go on to this same motion. Paula, is that correct?
That's right. So you're going to, so Councillor Van Alstyne would move this again, and then you ask for the secondary.
Okay, let me get a blank piece of paper, okay?
Okay.
Just turn it over.
I just got a second piece of paper, it's fine. A motion moved by Councillor Van Alstyne. And I'll need a seconder. Councillor Malott, I'll get you this time. Okay, so it says, be it resolved that Council adopt the third draft version of the 2020 municipal budget with a 0% increase. Okay, so the motion is now on the floor for discussion. It was moved by Councillor Van Alstyne, seconded by Councillor Malat. And it reads, be it resolved that council adopt the third draft version of the 2020 municipal budget with a 0% increase. Okay, so the problem I see with this is we have not given staff any direction on where they're going to take the 2.15%, the total levy that they require. We've given council no direction in terms of how we want them to cut the budget and what areas we want them to cut. So I think if we pass this motion as it is with a 0% increase, we need to provide the municipality with some direction. Councillor Van Alstyne.
I believe that we have competent staff that should be able to come to that within the information that they have available. And I trust them to make that decision and bring it in at 0%.
I think that's a very unfair statement because we have competent staff and we trusted them to do the best job that they can to bring in the budget that they did. It started off with a very high increase. They've brought it down. We've asked them to bring it down further. It was 2.29. Now it's dropped to 2.15 and we're saying keep cutting. And we're not giving the direction. And I think it's very unfair to just say, you know what, we're going to cut it at random and now you go deal with it. I think if we want to give staff this direction, it is our responsibility. We voted down a 2.15% version that's going to show no increase to the average taxpayer that hasn't had any assessment change. We voted that down. So I think if we need to cut that budget, we need to do a better job. Now, there was another idea that was tabled earlier, that the difference to get from a 0%, we draw some money out of reserves. That hasn't come back yet, and that's not in this motion either. So that was another possibility that we have. So I am wondering if, Cynthia, you're able to do a quick calculation, or maybe it's there in the number someplace. What would that amount be that we would need to take out of a reserve to hit that 0%?
So that's pretty easy to do. So on the third draft version 2, on the second page, there was the net levy requirements. The increase was $164,760. So that would be the amount that we would need to fund.
Okay, sorry. Can you direct me to the right page in the budget?
Sure, I opened my budget. Let me just see. Oh, I'm on the wrong version 2. So it's on what would be page 53 of 92 of the package.
Okay. So 164,760. So that's going to reduce, if we were to transfer that from reserves.
That's not what's on the floor right now, is it?
No, it is not. It's a discussion on there right now.
But the discussion is, how do we get to a 0% increase? That's what's on the floor. How do we get to a 0% increase?
Do that after.
Well, we have to give staff direction.
Then we can do that after. We need to do this one first.
This is this motion. How do we get to a 0% increase? We need to provide the direction in the motion. That's how we're going to get there. Councillor Duplessis.
No, the motion is on the floor already. We're on discussion. We haven't included how we get there in the motion. So we'll have to handle this motion, then we'll have to have another motion or discussion on direction.
I concur, that's the proper way to do it.
I'm going to check with our clerk. Paula, do we provide direction within this motion?
So because the resolution doesn't state that, and it could have, but it doesn't. I would suggest that vote on this, and if it carries, then pass table a resolution that says the difference whatever the difference between 2.14 and 0, or the difference of 164,700, whatever it is, be specific where it's coming from, that it come from reserves. That would probably be the quickest way to do it. And it gets the direction that is required. And that direction in this case, because it's the budget, should be through a resolution.
Okay, or can it be done through an amendment on this motion?
Well, it was a notice of motion. It can be. It's what council wants it to be. But it was a notice of motion that Maureen had tabled, so you should really vote on that notice of motion. I'd like that on that resolution.
We will vote on it, and I'll go grab some more papers, and we'll keep making motions. So I will write down our names as we vote.
Would you read it again, Jill? I lost all track of it.
Yeah, I will do that.
Thank
Give
you.
me a second. I'm going to just write our names down. So, because I'm going to have to do that anyways. And then we'll be clear right before we're voting. Okay, so the motion that we will be voting on, as it stands, is moved by Councillor Van Alstyne, seconded by Councillor Malott. Be it resolved that Council adopt the third draft version of the 2020 municipal budget with a 0% increase. Okay, so that's the motion that we will be voting on. I am against. Councillor Dufour.
For.
Councillor Duplessis.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Foster. Press the space bar, or let me unmute you.
My space bar is not working.
Okay, so I've just unmuted you. You're fine. How do you vote?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Malott.
For.
And Councillor Van Alstyne.
For.
Okay, so that motion is carried. Okay, just give me another piece of second to grab another piece of paper. I'd like to file a notice of motion that reads the increase be drawn from reserves.
The decrease.
Or the difference in the budget amounts from last year to this year, what represented increase in the levy, that amount be drawn from reserves. Okay, so let me write it up, and I will ask for a seconder. Actually, I need to ask, Paul, am I allowed to file a notice of motion and move a motion?
I don't think, let me just double check. I'm looking in the procedure bylaw, but I don't think there's anything that specifically says you can't. But let me see. Jill, I don't think you can. It says when a member's notice of motion has been called from the chair to two successive meetings. It refers to every time, when the notice of motion is called, that it's called from the chair, and you cannot call your own motion.
Okay, so I will need somebody to suggest where that money is coming from. Councillor Foster.
I move that we get the difference from the reserves.
Now, I had already started writing it. So Councillor Foster, is this wording acceptable to you? Be it resolved that the amount of $164,760 be drawn from reserve to cover the increase in levy amount for 2019, or sorry,
Yes.
2020.
Yes.
Okay. And I need a seconder on that notice of motion. Councillor Malott. Okay, so would you like this motion? Oh, we have to vote on this notice of motion. Let me go through writing the names again.
You can ask if we have any questions.
I'm gonna call it. Oh yeah, hold on. Let me get the names down. It's a process of writing this down, and then I'll call for questions.
Okay.
So notice of motions, Mayor Beer, there is no discussion. You have to call it.
Okay, we'll discuss it when we get to a motion part. Can I see your hand going up and down, kind of out of the peripheral of my eye? While I'm writing the names down, did you wanted to make a comment?
You call my name, Jill?
Did I not see your hand go up and down?
A few times, yeah.
Okay.
But this is Paula's right. We have to. I'm just wondering. We have to be specific with this. That's all I'm wondering. Does it mean? Is it have to be accountable in terms of where it comes from?
Right. So it is a notice of motion moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Malott. Councillor Foster has approved the wording. The wording says, be it resolved that the amount of $164,760 be drawn from reserves to cover the increase in levy amount for 2020. So that is the notice of motion. So what we're going to do is vote to accept the notice of motion, and then Councillor Foster would like this to be heard tonight, like we heard Councillor Van Alstyne's motion. And then it will go back onto the floor as a motion, and we will open the floor for discussion on the motion. So right now we're just voting to accept the notice of motion. So we'll go through the names to accept the notice of motion. I am for. Councillor Duke for.
Yeah, so am I. I'm for.
Councillor Duplessis.
In favor.
Councillor Hayden.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Malott.
Yes.
And Councillor Van Alstyne.
For.
Okay, so we will now move to the motion. And I'm assuming Councillor Foster is going to move that same motion, and I'll need a seconder on the actual motion. Councillor Duplessis?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion reads, be it resolved that the amount of $164,760 be drawn from reserves to cover the increase in levy amount for 2020. Okay, so now the floor is open for discussion on this motion. Councillor Van Alstyne. Oh, hold on, you are muted.
Okay. Okay, I have a question for Cynthia, actually.
Okay,
So we have this amount there coming out of reserves, but say, for example, between now and year end, we have savings in other areas. Can we use those savings to decrease the amount that we are taking from reserves?
So I would say yes. I always wait till the end of the year to do those kinds of transfers. So if we didn't need it, we wouldn't draw from it because I would recommend that it get funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve, because that's where we already have a motion that every year the surpluses or deficits get funded from that as part of the reserve policy. So it would be funded this similar way.
So in your opinion then, our motion should not say that it's coming from reserves. It should specify that it's coming from the reserve you just talked about.
Yeah, well, it would be given direction. I mean, it's the reserve and it's up to council. So either one is fine.
So it would, though, in a sense, be better if we had it from the, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact wording you gave of that reserve.
Yeah, the name of the reserve is the Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve.
Tax rate stabilization. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
and that would be the reserve that will be drawn from anyways, correct, Cynthia?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm just doing all of the wording on the motion. It takes a while to write everybody's names out. Okay, so back to opening up discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing no hands go up, I am going to call a motion. I am for this motion. Councillor Dufour?
For.
Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Councillor Hayden?
In favor?
Councillor Foster? Sorry, Councillor Foster, I usually do the unmuting of you. Councillor Foster again?
In favor?
Thank you, Councillor Malott.
In favor.
Okay, Councillor Van Alstyne.
In favor.
Okay, so that has carried. Okay, so I have shuffle those from there to there. All right, I'm just trying to keep the motions, my iPad, my tablet, and past motions all organized here. So we are now moving on to our next motion about the tax ratios. Let me just find what page that staff report starts on.
82.
82. Okay, so I will need a mover and a seconder. The motion reads, be it resolved that council adopt the 2020 tax ratios as presented and a bylaw be prepared. Sorry, Cynthia, I see you waving there.
Just ask that this maybe get deferred, because now we're going to have an overall tax rate decrease, and that might impact what we are allowed to do with some of the tax ratios. So I'd just like to do those numbers before I bring it forward again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will defer that motion.
In favor.
I was going to say, Paula, do we need to defer the motion, or can I just pull it?
It can just be withdrawn at this point. You haven't moved or seconded it.
Okay, so if no one moves or seconded, it's just withdrawn?
You can just withdraw it. It'll be in the minutes.
Okay, so that motion is withdrawn. We are now going on to page 87 in your agenda package. This is supporting correspondence about broadband services that we've received from the municipality of North Shore. So I'll need a mover and a seconder on this motion. Councillor Malott, Councillor Van Alstyne. Okay, so the motion reads, moved by Councillor Malat, seconded by Councillor Van Alstyne. Be it resolved that Council for the Town of Escala supports the correspondence regarding regional broadband received by the municipality of Huron Shores. Are there any questions or comments on this motion?
Does that affect us?
No, it's in support of another motion from another municipality. And what they're asking is the government fund and expand broadband services in the north. I'm just muting everybody because there's a lot of shuffling going on. So it doesn't have an impact on us whatsoever. It's just support for Huron Shores Municipality's resolution. Councillor Foster. Now hold on, just give me a second. I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay. There's probably a second part that would go with that. If we agree that we're supporting this, we should appoint somebody to work with the group of communities to help develop something that would go to the government.
Okay, in their correspondence, they have indicated that they're going to be contacting mayors from all of the areas from the Algoma District, Manitoulin District, Sudbury District, and I have not had any correspondence from them yet, but we can still support their correspondence that they're sending out and wait for their contact to see what that's going to involve. And then that will be brought back to council, see if there's anybody else that would like to sit on that.
Okay, that sounds all right.
Okay, so is there any other discussion on this? Okay, so I'll call the motion. I am for this. Councillor Dufour?
For?
Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Councillor Hayden?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
For?
Councillor Malat?
In favor.
And Councillor Van Alstyne?
In favor.
Okay, so that motion has carried. Okay, so the next three motions that we have passed a motion at a special meeting of council on April 26th. We can see that motion in our agenda package on page 89. And we have asked that the bylaws be prepared to reflect this. And this is waiving interest and penalties on outstanding taxes and water and sewer billings, waiving them from April 1st to September 1st. So these are the three bylaw. That's the first bylaw that we have here. I'll need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Van Alstyne.
Councillor Hayden?
Councillor Hayden. Okay, so moved by Councillor Van Alstyne, seconded by Councillor Hayden, to resolve that bylaw 296420 be adopted, being an amendment to bylaw 294519, being a bylaw to authorize billing and collection of wastewater. Oh. Okay, hold on. Okay, so this bylaw is for the collection of water and wastewater services.
Your Honor,
Yes, sorry.
are we going to vote on the last one, or did you say we're doing all three at once?
No, we're gonna be voting on them individually. I'm just a little bit
Okay.
confused that I'm just trying to figure this out. I'm just wondering if I have these out of order. Oh, okay. So if we actually, I'll read the motion as it reads, and then I'll speak to the motion. Moved by Councillor Van Alstyne, seconded by Councillor Hayden. Be it resolved that bylaw 296220 be adopted, being an amendment to bylaw 294519, being a bylaw to authorize billing and collection of water and wastewater services for the town of Espanola. Sorry, when I just was reading that, I was reading that incorrectly in my head, and I was misunderstanding. But when I actually go to the bylaw in our package, we can see the addition that the interest and penalties on the outstanding water and sewer billings be waived from April 1st to September 1st, 20. So that's written in the full bylaw. We are just approving the bylaw and the wording in that bylaw that has the addition on it. So even though it didn't state it in this motion, that's still what we're voting on here. So is there any questions to that? Sorry if I've confused any of you. The actual bylaw is on page 90 of your package. Okay, so I will call the motion. I don't see any hands going up or waving at me. So I am for this. Councillor Dufour?
Or
Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Councillor Hayden?
For.
Councillor Foster?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Malott?
In favor.
And Councillor Van Alstyne?
In favor.
Thank you. That motion is carried. Okay, so the next motion is the same idea. This, the addition in the actual wording of the bylaw is to waive interest penalties on outstanding property taxes. So the wording is not in this motion, but it's in the actual bylaw. That's found on page 91 of your package. I need a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Malott and Councillor Duplessis. Okay, so be it resolved that bylaw 296520 be adopted, being an amendment to bylaw number 294720, being a bylaw to provide for interim tax levy and payment of interim taxes for the year 2020. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. I am for the motion. Councillor Dufour?
or
Councillor Duplessis?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Malott.
For.
Councillor Van Alstyne.
For.
Okay, thank you. That motion is carried. Okay, moving on to the last one. This is to receive gas tax funds. Page 92 of your agenda package. I'll need a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Dufour. Did I see your hand go by, Councillor Foster? Okay. Okay, so moved by Councillor Dufour, seconded by Councillor Foster. Be it resolved that bylaw 2920 be adopted, being a bylaw to execute in the town of Espanola and the Ministry of Transportation for the province of Ontario for dedicated gas tax funds. Okay, any discussion on this motion? Okay, I will call the motion then. I am for the motion. Councillor Dufour?
for
Councillor Duplessis?
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Hayden.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Watt.
For.
Councillor Van Alstyne.
For.
Thank you. So that motion is also carried. Okay, so we are down to our favorite motion of the evening. It is a motion to adjourn the special meeting of council. Councillor Hayden, I see you waving your hands. Are you moving that motion? Yeah, you're moving the motion?
Councillor Van Alstyne.
Okay, thank you. That's what I had asked. Sorry if you misheard me. I was just ensuring that that's why your hand was up.
I just have one thing I'd like to say before we do that, Jill.
Talk while I'm writing a name down for a seconder.
Mrs.
Okay,
Councilor Hayden.
Okay.
What I was wondering about is I thought these e-scribes were going to have hyperlinks so that we could go back and forth from anywhere we wanted to in the document.
Okay.
And it's not doing that, and I think it should be.
We will get back to you on that because it's potentially more training.
Thank you.
Okay? And using the functionality. So
I can answer that right now if you want, Mayor Hill.
Please.
Go ahead.
So you're on the online during the meeting. Is that where you are?
Well, I'm on this line. I'm not on the. I'm on a different area.
So right now, council is not logged into eScribe. That hasn't been done yet. That's what we're talking about when we move forward. That council would be trained and would be able to follow through on eScribe. Yeah.
Just on my version, on the left-hand side, there's a little arrow and you can pop it open, and then like each agenda item is there. You can click on those and it'll take you to that section in the agenda. I don't know if that's what you meant, but.
Oh, sorry, that's why I'd asked if he was following along online, and he said no, he wasn't.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that. I thought you meant was I following. I had to be in a specific, I thought I needed the little iPad, but I don't have that.
Okay, we'll work on that with you, Councillor Dufour, to make sure you have the functionality that's going to help you with that. Okay,
Thank you.
It's probably something specific, and once we figure out what your questions or issues are, it may apply to everybody as well. Okay.
Excuse me, may I interject for a moment?
You may.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could maybe bring up at next meeting or so that we need to be talking about fireworks and the outdoor movie and things like that we usually do as a town. We'll likely have to make some decisions on those in the very near future.
Okay, I actually have those on the agenda for next week. Okay.
Thank you.
Paula, did you have something else you were going to say there? I saw you unmute for a second.
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, so I have a motion that's on the floor right now. It is moved by Councillor Van Alstyne. It is seconded by Councillor Hayden, and it reads, be it resolved that the special meeting of council is hereby adjourned at 8:28 p.m. I am in favor of this motion. Councillor Dufour, what about you?
Oh, I am too.
Councillor Dufour, thank you. I saw him word yes. Did other people say that as well?
Yes.
Councillor Hayden?
Yes.
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Malott?
I'll go along with everybody else, yes.
Councillor Van Alstyne?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, so we are adjourned. I will let you know that next week is still going to be at 7 p.m., but it's the meeting following that that's going to be at 4:30 because that had to be advertised, and we had talked about that before. So next week, we're still having a 7 p.m. meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Just so you're aware of that. Okay, have a great week, everybody, and talk to you next week.
Good night.
Thank you.